because today we're going to be reading The Black CD, written by Jacob L. Bloomer. And yeah, let's just get right into it. I think looking back on it all, I had a very gothic upbringing. By age 10, I had attended 2 family funerals and no weddings. I felt that I identified with the color black, and I found graveyards to be an excellent place to relax. They remain one of the few places where I've actually found enough quiet to be able to read peacefully. It's childhood that most people might think of as weird, and truthfully it was, yet I wouldn't change it for the world. I lived with my mother in a humble home on Deacon Road in Kingsvale, England. It was a pleasant and simple life. She dropped me off at school, head to her place at work, the local hair salon, and then pick me up by the end of the day, rinse and repeat. I spent almost every moment that I could with my mother. She was my role model, and I wanted to be as confident and composed as she always seemed to be. I hoped that by adulthood, I would have inherited those traits. And after recently reaching that milestone, all I can say is that my respect for the woman has increased exponentially. Being grown up is anything but relaxing. Anyway, let's get back on track. I imagine that a few eager readers might have come to the question when my father was during my youth. Well, here's your answer. Remember those funerals I mentioned? Yep, he was the second one. The first being my great-grandmother on my mom's side, but mom's side of the family tree. She was not a woman that I knew particularly well, I must say. It was one hell of an adjustment losing him so young, and he hit my mother and I with some serious force. I was only 6 at the time and was a little bit confused, to be honest, about what was going on. My great-nan passed away the year before, and I was getting to grips with that one, sort of, but the loss of a parent is a whole new matter, and I couldn't accept it. If you're wondering what it was that took my father's life, I got one word for you, and I recommend that you prepare yourself because it's an ugly one. Cancer. To add a specific word to the mix and that craves specifics, brain. It didn't take long to take him, apparently. I can't quite remember the journey, and all I remember is the ending. Thus, my mother and I were left alone. The company my father had worked for kindly paid off the mortgage of the house out of respect, and my mom also received some money from various places and people in order to support me. She did a great job overall, in my opinion. As previously stated, I believe that I was raised as a little goth kid. If you're picturing a child that wanted nothing more than one day to wake up in a body of a raven, you're pretty damn close to the mark. However, I wouldn't have associated myself with misery. I was quite happy with a great many things. I suppose I was more suited to the aesthetic than the lifestyle. Either way, I was never bothered about the way I was raised. In fact, I thought it was pretty awesome. One of my favorite things about my youth was all the effort my mother would put into Halloween. She treated it like Christmas. Only instead of wearing green, red, and white, you had to wear black. Dark red was also acceptable. She even went out of her way to get gifts for the occasion. I always made her little cards while she went out and purchased genuine presents. Pretty good ones too, actually. One year she gave me the ebony necklace of a slender snake coiling around the cylindrical T to form an anka. For the uninitiated, the anka is an Egyptian symbol for life. You have more likely seen one before, whether you know its name or not. Another year, she came home with a book full of ghost stories, all written by different authors. She read me a couple of the creepy but not so scary ones to me before bed, and I still have that book today, although I'm not too sure of where I put it. When I was 11 years old, my mother gave me a gift unlike any of her others. It was a CD case, and inside it was a music disc. I looked at the front cover and saw that it was allegedly had 20 scary songs for kids at Halloween. I jumped for joy, ran upstairs immediately, and started listening to track 1. She picked it up for me earlier in the week, heading out during her lunch hour, and waited patiently until Saturday afternoon to reveal the present. I was delirious with excitement, and I darted with it to the upper floor of the house, moving with all grace like a headless chicken. My mother called up to me from the bottom of the staircase when I had nearly reached her room to say that she needed to quickly pop out and search for some pumpkin. She did like she'd been checking throughout the week and everywhere had been sold out. I asked her if I could come with. The evening was approaching, and I didn't like being alone when it got dark outside. A goth kid that's afraid of the dark. Ironic, I know. Luckily, it was rare that my mother left me in the house by myself, and on the few occasions that she did, she always made sure it was bright outside. In response to my plea to go with her, She told me that she wouldn't be long and I had music to keep myself occupied. If I was scared, she would inform me that her number was on a piece of paper by the house phone and I could call her mobile. Reluctantly, I accepted defeat and sulked into her bedroom where the CD player was waiting for me. Just before entering the room, I shouted downstairs that I wanted her to be as quick as possible. As quick as she possibly could. She promised that she would be. When she left, I watched her go through the front window of her room. It was raining gently outside, and the soft pitter-patter of the rain made me feel quite sleepy. The clouds in the sky were a dismissal of gray, but nothing out of the ordinary. The weather's never great in England. It's something you get used to with time, and as a matter of fact, I felt rather comfortable with the rain. I just hoped my mother would be true to her word and return quickly. She didn't. I took the CD from its case and admired it before placing it into the CD player. It was a rich and oily black, like a thin slate of obsidian, with a hole at its very center. Beneath the fluorescent light of the bedroom, I caught a couple of glimpses of a subtle shine to the disc's reflective surface. It was like seeing a single star shimmering faintly in the otherwise empty midnight sky. I inserted the CD and clicked the play button. Then I listened to track 1 as I lay down on my mother's bed. Flat on my back with my hands on my stomach, I looked like an unwrapped mummy. The song was okay. The issue was that I've heard it before. I've been expecting every piece of music to be unique. I couldn't recall exactly where I heard track 1 before, but I knew it wasn't new to me. This isn't to say it was bad in any kind of way. I still enjoyed it. I just hoped to find something original in the playlist, and eventually I did. I found something I don't think anyone ever heard before. When track 2 started, I gave it my best shot, but I couldn't enjoy it. The lyrics were clearly aimed at children much younger than myself. I wanted something scary, something that would actually give me chills whilst being fun to listen to. I should have been more careful for what I wished for. I listened to a few more songs, skipping through any that I didn't instantly make a good impression, and I settled on track 12. That one was good, funky and a bit creepy. I thought it was ace. I even tapped my foot along to the beat as I laid on my mother's bed. I was getting tired of getting up to skip all the other songs, and it was a nice recline to something good playing in the background. Before I knew it, exhaustion took a hold of me, and my eyes started to close. Let us momentarily diverge from the tale in order to paint a picture of my mother's bedroom. It's an important setting, after all, as you have no doubt picked up on it by now. So without further ado, imagine the following in your mind. Located at the front of the house with a large rectangular window overlooking the rest of Deacon Road. Her room was placed where everything was designed or designated to a certain and specific location, from which likely would never be moved. Clutter was sacredly seen as the carpet, a gentle blue in color, was immaculately clean. The walls were relaxing cream color, and the wallpaper bore an intricate pattern that was still visible in some places, but for the most part had been worn away over the years. The bed, queen size, was gigantic for a kid like me, and incredibly comfortable. A sweet scent of vanilla hung in the air, and the rest of the world always seemed quiet in my mother's room. Treating the window as the far center of the room, there was a wooden end table that had been designed to look like several large books stacked on top of another. One over in the back left corner. It was on a decorative piece of furniture that the CD player resided. From where I lay, I could see some of the dust over the area, but there wasn't really much of it. Along the left wall of the room, other than the end table, there was a black wardrobe and a set of drawers, also darkly designed. The wood was flawlessly polished and looked brightly beautiful. My mother didn't have too many outfits stored in that space. She merely liked the way everything looked in her room, and I can't say I disagreed with her. Above the main section of the bed, suspended from the ceiling, was a light bulb that illuminated the room. It was shielded by a lampshade, which allowed me to lie below it without being blinded. Its switch was on the right-hand wall, very close to the door used for entering and leaving the bedroom. The right wall itself was mostly barren, with an exception of a large clock in the shape of a moon. It had no numbers on its surface, you just had to make an approximation, which isn't too much of a problem unless you really need to be specific. Either way, I could never understand why my mother wanted it. It could glow in the dark, so I guess that had it in its favor, and I still thought it was stupid, though. Well then, that's all I can think that's worth stating. Let's carry on with what happened when the music stopped and track 13 started to play. It wasn't a song. There was no beat, no rhythm, no instruments, and no melody of any kind. There was, however, a voice. The bone-chilling vocals of this mysterious narrator poured into the room like a cloud of poison. It was a voice that I've never heard again since that day, nor have I encountered anything capable of closely resembling it. It was as unique as memorable as was terrifying and baritone. If ever asked to identify the nightmare narrator today, regardless of how much time had passed, I know that I could do it. The senator around slithered from the speaker of the CD player and swarmed down my ear canal, where it managed to bury itself in the darkest part of my brain. It is something I know I shall carry with me until the grave. To the grave. Until then, no matter how hard I try, it will never leave. Pulled from a state of half sleep, I jolted upwards and turned to the source of the noise. There was nothing visually wrong with the equipment, and foolishly I thought I might have been overreacting, but to the intended audio of track 13. So naively, I chose to listen to what was being said, hoping that things would change. To say that the narrator had a deep voice would be a spectacular understatement. Their voice was as deep as dark as the ocean of time. My vocabulary at the age of 21 is nowhere near proficient enough to accurately describe what I heard that day in any level of detail. I sincerely doubt that a professional poet or practiced wordsmith could do some justice to something so monetarily atrocious. I shudder to think the sheer power possessed by the Focus as they spoke to me from the CD player. They ensnared me with weird words, rooting me to a spot, and I was frozen with absolute terror. At the door, I knocked 3 times. Thud, thud, thud. Goosebumps rose all over my flesh at the sudden noise downstairs. A ghostly hand delicately descended down the curve of my spine, and a couple of horror-birthed tears sprouted in my eyes. The sound that had come from inside the house. It wasn't meant as a warning of intrusion. They wanted me to know that they were already right there with me. Despite the tremendous volume of the narrator's voice, there was something else about them that I found to be petrifying. There was an eerie calm in all that they said that seemed to speak of cold inevitability. Like the subtext to everything they dared to utter was clearly visible before my eyes, reading simply, "However long you hide, wherever you run to, I will come and I will catch you." All my muscles starting to tense as I thought of just one thing. I had to turn the CD player off. Whatever was playing on track 13, it wasn't something I intended to continue subjecting myself for any longer. "Do you hear me in the hall?" The question was rhetorical, of course. I had no doubt of that. They weren't any kind of vocal response. It was fear that they were after, and boy, was I giving them one hell of a supply. Wordlessly, I screamed at myself to move as I heard their phantom footsteps from 2 places simultaneously. All the sound that erupted from the speaker could also be heard downstairs. That was with the exception of the stranger's voice. That seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere in a perfect parallel. It was inaudible as it was deafening, a paradox that I could not logically comprehend, and I doubt I will ever be able to fully explain. But that doesn't change the simple fact I know what I heard. "I love the photos in the corridor, Tyler. I'm coming up to see you now." My heart stopped pumping blood and instead sent ice shooting through my bloodstream. They knew my name? How do they know my name? All of my skin was suddenly frozen, and I found myself struggling to breathe. When I was very young, suffered from asthma, and I remember feeling that at the moment an attack was coming on. My former condition had returned from somewhere to take my life before an intruder could do the job. The air felt like tight and deprived of oxygen, and there's nothing I wanted more in the world than to satisfy my urge to scream. But I couldn't physically attempt anything close to such as feet. However, I knew that if I didn't move, without a doubt, it would all be over. I would die. It took a short while to summon the strength and courage that I needed, but once I had everything in hand, I rolled over in the bed towards the CD player like a dehydrated man in a desperate need of water. I reached out for my goal. The distance was far too great. It was much too great. That was when my vision started to blur. From the corners of my eyes, I could see a black mold starting to form and slowly close in on me. With each passing moment, my situation grew worse. Thud! The first step up the staircase sent a thunderous echo throughout the house, and the walls trembled. It was like being caught up at the ground zero of the world's worst earthquake. The shaking never lasted long, but it felt much worse when the second step was taken. I realized that they were getting closer, and I wasn't doing anything to stop them. I think a lot of people, when recalling past trauma, just like I am doing as I attempt to construct this tale now, using the phrases such as, "I should have acted sooner." Whilst this is definitely true in my case, I do not hate or blame myself for hesitating. I remember all too well what it was like to be trapped in the bedroom with nothing to listen to other than the footfalls of the approaching intruder. By the time they were halfway up the stairs, I was out of bed and leaning over the end table. My vision was nothing but a small circle of clarity, surrounded by lightning forks and black blindness. The weather outside had worsened by quite a bit, and a storm was on the way. Before the narrator could declare that they were possessed any further, I pressed the square button of the CD player to stop whatever the hell was going on. I collapsed forward, dazed and unable to maintain my balance. I smiled as I hit the ground. I had heard clear as day the all too important click of this to signal the CD that had stopped playing, and to confirm my theory, the footsteps had ceased. I was safe. I drew in a deep breath of beautiful air, finding no difficulty in doing so, and expelled it with glee as I lay sprawled on the carpet of my mother's bedroom. Then the laughter started. The house rocked unsteadily on its foundation, and I was suddenly once again gasping for breath. I held my throat with both hands, praying for the sweet taste of oxygen. A terrible roar of corrupted joy filled my ears. It was intoxicating. The narrator was closer, and they were going to reach me. I knew it. There wasn't a thing that I could do, but I still wanted to try. After a few moments of the triumphant laughter stopped, and my breathing seemed to settle. It was unsteady, and I still feel like I needed more oxygen, but I was able to manage. That was when I decided to make a move. Using the bed as support, I stumbled clumsily back on my feet and waddled to the foot of the bed, where I could look at the door. I thought about how my mother had left her phone number downstairs, and there was no way of contacting her without encountering whatever was after me. 1 step, 2 step, 3 step 4. Who's that knocking at your door? 2 step, 3 step, 4 step 5. Is Tyler Jones still alive? I listened as they strolled from the top of the staircase past the back wall of the bedroom and the door. My body was quivering, but I tried to maintain a brave face the best I could. My sight had returned to normal after my brief collapse, and I was mentally trying to prepare myself for what was about to come my way. They were so close now, and I didn't know whether it was worth diving out the window and running for the hills. As I contemplated the idea, there was a guttural rumble of thunder from the sky. The storm was underway. "I'm outside the door! Let me in!" Although the voice had been so naturally intense, the line was delivered barely above a whisper. It was like I was being mocked. They had arrived at the bedroom without an issue, and were asking that I kindly open the door to confirm that it was already a fact. They had won. I didn't move. All I did was stare at the door. The handle didn't move, and no hand struck the other side. However, I could see something at the bottom through the small gap. Perhaps it was a shadow. Maybe it was something else. As soon as I registered that there was something there, it disappeared. "I'm outside the door. Let me in." It was somewhat louder the second time round, but I made no move to obey their command. What haunted me about their cry was that it was the only volume that seemed to alter. Their tone of speech remained consistently calm, just like the narrator's voice. "I'm outside the door, let me in!" They shouted so loud that the house itself seemed to shiver. Yet there was no hint of genuine irritation that I could detect. I gripped the bed with both hands and knees, and knuckles clenched so hard that my skin was as white as bone. I was shaking frantically, and I had been younger at the time, I think I would have let myself. My mind raced with several ideas of what to do, all of which were frankly awful. The only option was to wait, which I did. For a time, nothing seemed to have happened, and the intruder was silent. I was not foolish enough to think that even for a second that they had left. Just past the door they were waiting. I knew it. I could picture them clearly. A figure of shadow so tall they needed to slouch forward to stop their head from colliding with the ceiling. They were there, hunched over and staring at the door with the passion. The one feature of their person that I knew I could describe with confidence with their eyes. I knew exactly what they looked like. After all, I'd already seen them in a way. If I opened the door, my gaze would fall upon two spheres that, because the empty black of the polished obsidian, with small segments of occasional light glistening from their surface. That's when I had the idea to try to eject the CD. It's something you might have thought might have come to mind sooner. I had stopped the disc from playing, but I hadn't locked it back up in its case. I imagined that if I was thinking straight, I might have had the idea earlier. I also think that there's something trying to stop me from conjuring such a plan. There was some kind of external brain force or parasite corrupting my brain and preventing me from taking action. I never know if I'm right or wrong about that, I suppose. It doesn't matter anyway, does it? The only thing of the importance is the fact that I managed to gain the precious second of composure to come up with a strategy. When I came up with my plan, all hail my belated stroke of genius, I darted to the CD player and slammed my hand on its top. If I pressed down on the lid that housed the discs, it would automatically open. And I know what you're thinking. That's some pretty advanced technology right there. Damn right. When the top leapt open, I snatched the black CD and thrust it back into its case, doing the whole action in a single fluid movement. It was done, I hoped. I've been fooled once, and I didn't want to be tricked again. What I decided on doing was waiting for my mother to return to find me. Before that, the curiosity's sake, I would place my ear to the door and listen for any signs of life, making sure not to touch the handle. I approached cautiously and a little bit reluctantly, placing one foot in front of the other with an incredible amount of care. Nothing seemed to make any noise, aside from the storm which continued to rage on. All was perfectly silent in the house. On any other day, the fact might have scared me. Not then. I couldn't have been quite happier about the quiet. After confirming that I could hear nothing from outside the bedroom, I took a few steps back towards the window, continuing to face the door just in case, and I sighed heavily. Think I'm outside the door. Let me in. It stopped, as did everything else. The universe took a moment to pause and held in suspense. There was nothing remotely calm about the voice that time. It had screams like an animal being slaughtered, full of hunger, anger, and hatred. I stood roughly half a meter away from the door with a rough idea in my mind what was about to happen. I fought away the urge to start hyperventilating and crawl into a fetal position. If there was any time to be tough, it was precisely that second. On the mark of what I felt could be my final exhalation, it happened. In! The voice screamed at the door, and the door flew open, and its hinges shattering like glass. Whatever happened next, I don't remember it. I'd like to think that I fought, and I did so bravely. I cannot see the individual responsible for my torment, and don't intend to lie and claim that I did. All I know is that when my mother returned, I was fast asleep in her bed, clutching her Halloween gift to my chest. The weather outside was depressing, but it wasn't anything close to extreme. Only the soft pitter-patter of the rain graced in the window. I told my mom about track 13, and can you guess what she said? If anyone opted for it, there was no track 13. Well done to you! She showed me that herself that the place was numbered 1 to 12 and 14 to 21. Apparently, track 13 had been cut out due to the superstition that it was a cursed number. So what might I think? Was it track 14 that I listened to? Nope. Before the voice even began, I heard a much more monotone speaker announce that it was track 13 about to be played. Maybe I heard wrong. It's possible, although I did go back and play track 14 at a later date just to check whether or not I was mistaken. It was just a normal and admittedly quite awful Halloween theme song. I would have come to a doubt that everything had happened that day. It wasn't for the trouble I had getting to sleep. I mean, after I'd experienced, who wouldn't have trouble sleeping, right? Every time I closed my eyes that night, in the minute fraction of time between them and being open and shut, I'd seen something standing at the foot of my bed. They were a tall figure and slouched over my body so that their face peered directly at my own. Their eyes were the color of the midnight sky. They came every night for years, and during that time I could never dream. My mind was drained and empty, and I believe that that's what they wanted from me. All of my dreams and nightmares. They were a dream eater, or at least that's what I called them. It was that grotesque feeding that inspired me to nickname them Leech, an appropriate name, I felt. The more I thought about it, the better it suited them. What do you think a leech would never sound like if it could imitate human speech? Whatever you're thinking, that's exactly what I heard when they first whispered to me from the other side of the door. Around a year ago, when I was preparing my stuff for an eventual departure from Beacon Road, I stumbled upon the black CD. It had been locked away in the attic by my mother a few moments after the incident, and while she had forgotten all about it, I had searched multiple times and never did manage to find it. So, what did I do when I found it? Did I burn it, break it, or smash it? No, I did something much worse. I sold it. There wasn't much to be made from the sale, but the guy I gave it to thought he'd be able to sell it to someone simply based on how it looked and not what it was on. That was all fine by me, so as long as I get rid of it, I was rid of it. I didn't expect anything to change. I thought I could continue to be haunted for the rest of my life, but a few weeks after the initial transaction occurred, Leech disappeared from the foot of my bed, and I started to dream again. I don't know who purchased this black CD and found track 13, and all I can say to them is that I'm sorry, which doesn't amount to much, does it? Perhaps over the course of the past year, I had treated hands again. It's not impossible. For all I know, one day in the distant future, someone reading this tale of mine might make me be in the fortunate soul in possession of that accursed artifact. Check your attic if you're curious. Don't worry about finding it. It will find you, if it needs to, so as long as you're close by. And if you do manage to discover it, destroy it. succeed where I fail, and cleanse this planet from its presence. Whatever lurks within the world of the elusive track of Track 13 is being imaginal patience. If allowed to live, I believe it will lie and dormant in the Black City for all eternity. If need be, just waiting for the night, for the right time, waiting for the day that someone decides to listen. Good God. I generally don't have anything to say. Like, that's just fucking weird. But yeah, that is the ending of this one. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you're new to my channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button, give the thumbs up, and hit the bell so you notify videos which is daily. I love you guys, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.